There is a certain kind of person who never makes mistakes. At least, not in their own mind. When something goes wrong, it is never their fault. It was the timing. The system. The boss. The partner. The friend. The world. And if you listen closely, you'll notice something unsettling. They are always surrounded by problems, yet somehow never responsible for any of them. This video is about that person. But more importantly, it is about what they are hiding from themselves. The person who blames others all the time often appears confident. They speak with certainty. They explain things quickly. They sound convincing. But psychologically, constant blame is not strength. It is defense. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Blamers do not see themselves as defensive. They see themselves as unlucky. They believe life keeps happening to them. This belief protects them from a far more painful truth. That some patterns repeat because they are the common denominator. You have seen this person at work. They miss a deadline, but it is because no one explained it properly. They underperform, but the system is rigged. They clash with coworkers, but everyone else is toxic. Notice what never happens. They never say, "I misjudged. I reacted poorly. I need to improve." Because self-reflection does not feel like growth to them. It feels like collapse. Blame is not about others. It is about avoiding shame. Deep down, chronic blamers carry a fragile sense of self. Admitting fault does not feel like learning. It feels like losing their identity. So the ego builds armor. Every accusation becomes a shield. Every excuse becomes a wall. And the more they blame, the less they understand themselves. In relationships, this pattern becomes even clearer. Arguments never end in resolution. Only in explanations. It is your tone. It is how you said it. You always do this. The goal is not understanding. The goal is escape from accountability. Eventually, their partners feel exhausted. Not because conflict exists, but because responsibility never does. Silence is dangerous for blamers. Because silence invites reflection. That is why they fill space with explanations, narratives, and reasons. They talk at reality instead of listening to it. Jung would call this projection. Traits they reject in themselves are unconsciously assigned to others. Laziness. Incompetence. Selfishness. The louder the accusation, the deeper the denial. In families, blamers often play the victim. They are misunderstood. Unappreciated. Always treated unfairly. But ask siblings quietly and a pattern emerges. Same conflicts. Same reactions. Same emotional explosions. Different people. Same outcome. Here is the truth most blamers never face. If everything is someone else's fault, then they have no control. Blame feels powerful, but it removes agency. Because if you are never responsible, you are never free. Freedom requires ownership. Growth requires humility. Both require courage. By now, you may already be thinking of someone. A coworker. A friend. A family member. Or if you are very honest, a version of yourself from a time you would rather forget. Because blame does not always start loud. Sometimes it starts quietly. At first, blame is occasional. A bad day. A bad break. A bad decision blamed on bad circumstances. But over time, something shifts. Blame stops being a reaction and becomes a personality. They are no longer someone who made a mistake. They are someone to whom mistakes keep happening. This is where growth quietly dies. You know this friend. Every job they have ever had was toxic. Every boss was unreasonable. Every opportunity was unfair. At first, you sympathize. Then you notice the pattern. Different companies. Different people. Same complaints. And slowly, you realize something uncomfortable. They do not want solutions. They want confirmation that they are not the problem. Blamers do not just avoid responsibility. They crave being right. Being right means being safe. Because being wrong would mean questioning the story they tell themselves. So when confronted with facts, they shift the frame. That is not what I meant. You are missing the point. That is not how it happened. Reality becomes flexible. Truth becomes negotiable. Not to deceive others, but to protect the ego. Have you ever argued with someone and felt like you were walking in circles? Every time you address one issue, they bring up another. Every time you explain, they reinterpret. By the end, you are exhausted and nothing is resolved. That is not a misunderstanding. That is avoidance disguised as debate. Here is a trait many people miss. Blamers often feel morally superior. They see themselves as the victim of incompetent people. They believe they are more aware, more ethical, more reasonable. This creates a dangerous inner narrative. If others are always wrong, then I must be right. Jung warned about this. When the ego refuses to confront its shadow, it inflates itself to compensate. Superiority replaces self-awareness. Look at how some people behave online. They blame society. They blame systems. They blame entire groups. There is always an enemy. Always a villain. Always someone else at fault. Rarely introspection. Rarely nuance. Blame becomes entertainment. Outrage becomes identity. Being around a chronic blamer changes you. You start walking on eggshells. You choose your words carefully. You avoid certain topics. Not because you are wrong, but because you are tired. Over time, you may even start doubting yourself. That is when blame becomes contagious. In families, blamers often use guilt. If you really cared, you would have known. If you were not so selfish, this would not have happened. Responsibility is quietly transferred. You are left carrying emotional weight that was never yours. This is not communication. It is emotional outsourcing. Here is the hard truth. Blamers rarely change until blame stops working. As long as others apologize. As long as relationships adjust. As long as someone else absorbs the cost. There is no reason to reflect. Change requires discomfort. And blamers are experts at avoiding it. You cannot argue someone out of blame. You cannot reason them into accountability. What you can do is stop over-explaining. Stop defending obvious truths. Stop carrying responsibility that is not yours. Silence, boundaries, and clarity reveal more than confrontation ever will. The person who blames others all the time is not evil. They are afraid. Afraid of failure. Afraid of inadequacy. Afraid of facing the parts of themselves they have spent years running from. But fear does not excuse harm. And understanding someone does not mean sacrificing yourself. The moment you stop absorbing their blame is the moment their mask begins to crack. And what they do next will tell you everything you need to know. One day, the person who blames everyone else will be left with no one left to blame. No co-workers. No partners. No friends. Only silence. And in that silence, the truth finally arrives. That every door they believed was closed to them was locked from the inside. Because blame does not protect you. It imprisons you. And the moment you realize this is the moment responsibility stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like power. Until then, some people will spend their entire lives running from themselves while calling it bad luck. And now that you can see this pattern clearly, the real question is not who around you is blaming others. The real question is what you will do when you recognize it. There is nothing wrong with confidence. Nothing wrong with knowing your worth. But there is a quiet line between confidence and illusion. And the person who constantly needs to prove how great they are is often trying to convince themselves first. Because real self-worth does not need an audience. It does not need constant validation. It does not need to announce itself. It shows in humility. In listening. In the ability to admit, I was wrong. The one who thinks too highly of himself often stands tall on the outside while standing on very fragile ground within. And the louder the self-praise becomes, the more carefully you should listen for what is being hidden underneath. Because sometimes the greatest ego in the room is not a sign of strength. It is a sign of protection. And once you learn to see that, you stop being impressed by the performance and start paying attention to the person behind it. That is when understanding begins.